A little while ago, I made a video talking about the M1 Pro MacBook Pro, specifically the 14-inch base configuration and what it's like to use in 2025. And in that video, there were a lot of positives, and I generally came away with the impression that it is still a fantastic laptop to buy. If you want to check that video out, you can do so right over there after this video. But I made one big mistake in that video, and that mistake is this. Now, let me be more specific, because for me personally, this base configuration MacBook Pro comes just short of what I need in one key aspect. And I'm sure that several of you who do video editing can guess what that one aspect is, but for those who aren't aware, let me run down the specs for you and then I will tell you what I got wrong. So this is, as I said, the base configuration of the M1 Pro MacBook Pro. That means it has the binned CPU and GPU with 8 cores on the CPU and 14 cores on the GPU, 16 gigabytes of unified memory, and 512 gigabytes of storage. Now, if you're not familiar with what unified memory is, that's kind of what we're going to talk about today in a bit more detail, because that is the problem. Not the actual unified memory technology, but the amount of it. 16 gigabytes is not enough for what I do. And I made this mistake once before, but now I find myself in the boiling frog in the water, because I thought that it would be enough. Let me explain my situation. Way back when Apple Silicon was first introduced, I bought the base configuration M1 Mac Mini. This was an 8 gigabyte model, and I knew that 8 gigabytes of memory wouldn't be enough. I was coming from a 32 gigabyte MacBook Pro. But I figured, well, Apple said that unified memory with 8 gigabytes is more like 16. I'll believe them because I'm not as familiar with unified memory, which obviously now I am. And so 8 gigabytes ended up being a swap monster. And for those of you who don't know what swap is, that's where you run out of memory, well, RAM, and it starts dumping whatever it needs into storage instead, because it just can't keep any more in memory. A little bit of swap is okay. I generally say that if it's in the megabytes, you're fine, but once it crosses over into gigabytes, that's when we start having problems, because that will quickly deteriorate your SSD. But anyway, later on I bought the upgraded 16 gigabyte version of the M1 Mac Mini, and that was a lot better. And 16 gigabytes in my use case was actually fine. Barely any swap was happening, again, in the megabytes, and I ran my entire channel off of that 16 gigabyte base configuration Mac Mini for almost 2 years until I bought a Mac Studio. That, however, is where I began to dramatically expand what I do here on the channel. When it comes to video editing, specifically the kind of videos that I make, there are 3 things that can increase the amount of memory that you're going to need in your system. One of them is the footage type. Now, I'm overseas right now. I did not bring my big Sony camera with me, so I'm filming on my iPhone. And yeah, that probably doesn't use a whole lot of memory when you're using the default camera app, but these iPhones can also record in ProRes. And if you are recording in ProRes, that is a very high bandwidth type of video, and that can eat up memory. The second thing that can eat up a lot of memory are effects, specifically things like cutting out this background or adding some kind of 3D graphics in the background, or just moving graphics in general. I did an entire video where I reviewed each of Apple's products from their 2000s lineup, and that ate up a ton of memory on my Mac Studio because I had all of these graphics, all these graphs, and these were all being made and rendered in real time on the timeline. The third thing that can eat up your system's memory when you're editing is the length of your videos. And in my case, even when you're filming in HEVC on your iPhone, it really doesn't help when you're making a 40-minute video. I recently took a tour of Syntrend Creative Park, and that video was 40 minutes. And during the editing process for that video, I ate up 7 gigabytes of swap. That is 43% of the 16 gigabytes of RAM that this system has shifted over to the SSD because I was out of memory. But the reason I say that I find myself now in the frog in the boiling water situation is because I figured that this system would be completely fine for on-the-go editing. I wouldn't really have to do a whole lot with it, so 16 gigabytes was fine because, well, unified memory is pretty decent, even if it isn't the claimed 8 gigabytes feels like 16 gigabytes. But I have been, ever since I got my Mac Studio, expanding my work and expanding my editing techniques and adding plugins that use memory memory, adding more graphics, cutting out backgrounds, all that kind of stuff. And each of those little things along the way has increased the amount of memory that my systems need if I'm even going to touch video editing. And because I have a Mac Studio with 32 gigabytes of unified memory, I was able to grow into that and still have headroom, so I never thought about it. But in reality, even with that 32 gigabytes of memory, I was happily eating up over 16 just in my video editing tasks. And so, if you're eating up 16 gigabytes of memory on a 32 gig system, well, that's completely fine. And when you do it on a system that only has 16, well, you're gonna run out pretty darn quick. So then what's the solution? Well, unfortunately, the solution is going to be getting another MacBook Pro, the one with 32 gigabytes. Now, that is expensive, but it's not as expensive as it could be, because as I mentioned in my previous video, these machines are a great value right now. And I say that unironically. I know a lot of people out there are gonna say, oh, Apple computers a value, yeah, that's funny. But they actually are, because this thing was $2,000 brand new. And with 32 gigabytes, it was even more. But you can pick one of these up now for under $1,000, and if you find one that's in acceptable or good condition based on the Amazon refurbishers, you can get them for even around $800. That is fantastic, and if you're willing to take a bargain on Facebook Marketplace, or rather a gamble on Facebook Marketplace, you can find them for even cheaper. When it comes to the unified memory that Apple uses in their systems, there are tons of benefits to this memory. You have 200 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth. That is insane. Even something like the 6400 megatransfers per second on something like the ROG Ally, which is also using memory that is shared between the graphics and the system, this only runs at 100 gigabits per second for data bandwidth. Half of what Apple's doing with their MacBook Pros. And that's not even counting if you're moving up to the Max or the Ultra series, where you're going with 400 or 800 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth. Apple has done a fantastic job of making this memory extremely fast and really leveraging that in both the graphics and the system memory department. But at the end of the day, I said it in a previous video and I'll say it again, data is data. And if you don't have enough space for the data, it's gonna have to go somewhere. And I'm sure with this video, there's gonna be comments down below saying, this is what happens when Apple doesn't make their system upgradable, and everything should be on a slot, and everything should be held in with Phillips head screws, and there should be no proprietary anything. And look, for some things, I agree with you. For something like storage, yeah, that should absolutely be modular. There is no reason for Apple to solder it to the board, especially with PCIe Gen 5 getting such insane speeds, basically the same speeds or more than what Apple's doing with their soldered storage. There is no reason for that, and Apple's claim that it's for security is completely pointless, because you can just encrypt your drive, and even if it comes out of the system, nobody's getting into it, at least not until Microsoft finishes making their quantum computers. But when it comes to unified memory, the way that Apple has been able to optimize it to scale between whatever is needed through the entire system, from system memory to graphics to whatever else you'll need it for, that benefit, those benefits, only come from the fact that it is soldered directly in line with the SoC, and running it through a slot or having it be swappable with less memory or more memory or lower quality memory, that would in many ways negate the benefits that Apple has been able to do with unified memory. Now, before anybody gets worried that my previous video is no longer valid, no, everything in that video is still completely valid. The value of these machines, now that they've come down in price, the performance you can get out of the M1 Pro chip, even the memory. The memory itself, if you only need it for basic video editing or things like web browsing, as long as you're not a tab-hungry monster using Chrome, it's totally fine. Even some light photo editing and light professional work. However, in my specific use case, there was one big mistake, which was the memory. So the next step for me personally is going to be getting a 32 gigabyte M1 Pro MacBook Pro, and I will be making a video about it, comparing it to the 16 gigabyte MacBook Pro, because there are things that you'll see where as memory starts getting swapped out to the SSD, performance on the system does start to feel a little sluggish. And we'll talk more about the benefits and disadvantages to swap, the benefits to more memory, and as I keep saying, data is data. When you run out of space for that data, well, there are going to have to be compromises made. So hopefully this video helps some of you out there, especially for anybody watching my previous video and thinking that maybe you should get the base configuration M1 Pro MacBook Pro because it is a good value. These things have come way down in price. But if you are at all worried that 16 gigabytes of memory won't be enough, don't make the same mistake I did. Don't go with 16 and think, oh, it's totally fine. If you even remotely think that 16 isn't enough, spend the extra $100, get the 32 gigabyte model. I guarantee you, you will not regret it. And it will save you a lot of money compared to what I have to do now. Either way though, that's been it. Just wanted to get on here and let you all know about the mistake that I made, because when I make a video and I fully recommend something and then my opinion or my experience changes, I try to make sure that I keep you all up to date. And in this case, the base configuration for me was fine until it wasn't. And well, that was my mistake, and I want to make sure that you don't make the same mistake as me. But either way, that's been it. Thank you all so much for watching. Huge thanks to my members. $3 a month. You all can come in, get some emojis, get some special things with my store, tons of stuff like that. So if you're interested, definitely check that out. And aside from that, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoy this content and you want to see more of it. And I will see you all in the next video. Make sure to be there and have a good one.